Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts. Here's Daniel's prompt.
Hi there, Herman and Corn. So we talked in a previous episode about the fascinating world of logistics and supply chain and how Israel is a major consumer of AliExpress goods. And over the course of the past 10 years or so, a long time that a lot of people have been buying from them, we've seen it go from like a month down to about 2 weeks. And we talked about how that works and how it's possible to move things around the world. Postal subsidies were part of our conversation there. And what I want to talk about today is another nuance of the AliExpress logistics operation or masterpiece, and that is something called consolidation. So they introduced this concept a few years ago, I think, by which if you were a frequent purchaser of goods from AliExpress, and I'm definitely, at one point was definitely in that category, but they seem to have actually loosened that up a bit now, and that I don't buy things that frequently anymore. But even if I do buy, let's say, 4 or 5 small computer parts over the course of over a few days, let's say, for example, I think recently I picked up micro HDMI to HDMI adapters, right? Little small things that they're really hard to find locally, and I'll just my first instinct is I'll get those on AliExpress. Today I need to buy some cable clamps. So it's a lot of small things like this that are always makes me feel bad when they send them all the way from around the world individually. So I actually like the consolidation. But when you look at the tracking, you see it's moving to a consolidation warehouse, and they're frequently doing routing through a third country as well. So it kind of moves from Shenzhen in China through to Singapore. And what they seem to do from my observation of the tracking status, they move the stuff out of China. They sometimes take their time doing that, like it's not necessarily expedited. And then it's that flight, if they use air freight, it's that flight from wherever they've consolidated your things that they move it very quickly. So it can kind of take like a week to kind of make its way out of China through export custom clearance, then hits the consolidation warehouse, then hits the airport, and then 3 days later it's on your door in Israel. So my question is, I'm sure that we talked about in the last episode what a tightly run ship, pun intended, AliExpress logistics is, and how everything is computed. And I'm certain that they know what they're doing, and if this is the model they've gone for, that this is the most efficient and economic model for them is. But I think for most people, moving it from point A to point B to get to point C seems like a roundabout way of doing things. And I would have thought as well that the cost of the air freight, we know in logistics that air freight is the most expensive modality of transport, that would be a cost driver rather than a cost saver. So I'd like to leave it there and ask you, Herman and Corn, knowers of IoT, logistics, and all things, how is it that this model makes sense for a company like AliExpress shipping things to the Middle East?
Hey everyone, welcome back to My Weird Prompts. We are coming to you from our home in Jerusalem, and I have to say the energy in the house is a bit high today because we are diving back into one of our favorite rabbit holes, logistics.
Herman Pottleberry here, and I am ready. I have been refreshing tracking pages and reading white papers on global supply chains all morning. It is a glorious day to be a nerd, Corn.
It really is. Our housemate Daniel sent us a voice note that really got us thinking. He has been noticing a change in how his AliExpress orders arrive. Specifically, he is seeing this consolidation model where multiple small items are being routed from China through a third country like Singapore before they finally make it here to Israel.
It is a fascinating shift. Daniel was pointing out that air freight is notoriously expensive, so on the surface taking the scenic route through Singapore seems counterintuitive. Why add more miles and an extra stop if you are trying to keep costs down?
Exactly. It feels like the opposite of efficiency. But as we know with these massive global players, if they are doing it, there is a very calculated reason behind it. Today we are going to unpack the hidden logic of the AliExpress consolidation model, and why the long way around is actually the fastest and cheapest path to your doorstep.
I love this because it touches on everything from geography to data science to international postal treaties. It is not just about moving a box, it is about moving information and optimizing every cubic centimeter of a cargo hold.
So let us start with the basics. Herman, when we talk about consolidation in the context of e-commerce, what are we actually looking at? Because most people think of their order as a single journey from the seller to them.
Right, the old model was very fragmented. You would buy a phone case from one seller in Shenzhen and a charging cable from another seller in Guangzhou. Each of those sellers would package the item and hand it off to a local courier or the national post office. Those two tiny packages would travel independently across the world, which is incredibly inefficient.
Because you are paying for the overhead of 2 separate shipments, 2 sets of labels, and 2 individual entries into the customs system.
Exactly. And more importantly, those tiny packages are hard to handle. They get lost, they are oddly shaped, and they do not stack well. Consolidation is the process of gathering all those small orders from different sellers that are headed to the same general destination, say a specific region in the Middle East, and bundling them into a larger, more manageable unit.
But wait! The prompt specifically mentioned these orders going through Singapore. If I am a seller in China and the buyer is in Israel, Singapore is not exactly on the way. It is a significant detour to the south. Why go there first?
This is where the concept of a logistics hub becomes crucial. Singapore, and specifically Changi Airport, is one of the most advanced logistics nodes in the entire world. Alibaba, which owns AliExpress, has a logistics arm called Cainiao. Cainiao has built massive smart warehouses in these strategic hubs.
So it is like a giant sorting machine for the world.
Precisely. By routing everything through a hub like Singapore, Cainiao can achieve massive economies of scale. Instead of trying to find enough packages in one city to fill a plane to Tel Aviv, they can pull packages from all over China into Singapore. Once they are in Singapore, they have a much larger pool of items to work with. They can then build high-density pallets specifically for the Middle East market.
That makes sense from a volume perspective, but does the cost of that extra flight not eat up all the savings?
You'd think so, but here is the secret. Not all air freight is created equal. There are 2 main ways things move by air. You have dedicated cargo planes, and you have the belly of passenger planes. Singapore is a massive transit point for passenger flights. There is a constant stream of planes leaving for every corner of the globe. Cainiao can buy up that excess belly space at a fraction of the cost of chartering a dedicated freighter.
Ah, so they are basically hitchhiking on passenger routes. And because Singapore is such a major hub, there are more hitchhiking opportunities than there might be from a smaller regional airport in China.
Exactly, and it is not just about the flight. It is about the processing. Singapore has incredibly efficient customs and transshipment protocols. They have what are called free trade zones, where goods can be landed, sorted, and reshipped without ever officially entering the country in a legal or tax sense. This minimizes the paperwork and the delays that often happen at national borders.
I see. So the time you lose by flying south to Singapore is gained back by the sheer speed of the automated sorting and the frequency of the outgoing flights. It is the difference between waiting 3 days for a direct bus that is rarely on time, or taking 2 quick subways that run every 5 minutes.
That is a perfect analogy. And we have to talk about the last mile efficiency too. When those consolidated packages arrive in Israel, they are already grouped together. Instead of the local postal service receiving 50 tiny separate envelopes throughout the week, they get one large, clearly labeled shipment. This makes the final delivery much more predictable and less prone to errors.
It sounds like a masterpiece of data orchestration. They must be tracking every single one of these tiny items in real time to make sure they all meet up at the right warehouse at the right time.
They are. The IoT or Internet of Things aspect of this is mind-blowing. Every parcel has a digital twin. Cainiao's algorithms are constantly calculating the most efficient route based on current flight availability, warehouse capacity, and even weather patterns. If a flight from Singapore is delayed, the system might pivot and route the next batch through a different hub like Dubai or Liège in Belgium.
It is amazing how much thought goes into a $5 micro HDMI adapter. Let us take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to dig into the volumetric weight problem and how that plays into this consolidation strategy.
Are you tired of your thoughts just drifting away like idle, dirty pamleams? The with Venalbice, designed to record your subconscious mumblings and play them back to you at 3 times the volume. The Echo Catcher uses a patented biorhythmic microphone that attaches directly to your throat. It captures every grunt, sigh, and what was I doing again, and stores it in our unencrypted cloud for your convenience. Never lose a grocery list or a deep success Finlil is a victim of kind of day in a Vilgaroskers.
All right, thanks, Larry. I am not sure I want to hear my subconscious mumblings played back at 3 times the volume, but to each their own. Anyway, back to the world of logistics. Herman, before the break, I mentioned volumetric weight. For those who are not logistics nerds, why is that such a big deal for air freight?
This is a huge factor in why consolidation makes so much sense. In the world of shipping, space is often more valuable than weight. Imagine you are shipping a box of lead weights and a box of pillows. The lead weights are small but heavy. The pillows are light but take up a huge amount of space. If the airline only charged by weight, the pillows would be practically free to ship, but they would take up the whole plane.
Right, so they charge you based on whichever is greater, the actual weight, or the volumetric weight, which is basically the size of the box.
Exactly. Now think about those individual AliExpress orders. If a seller ships a small cable in a padded envelope, there is a lot of dead air inside that envelope. If you have 10,000 of those envelopes, you are paying for a massive amount of empty space in the cargo hold.
But if you consolidate them?
If you consolidate them, you can pack them tightly into a single large container. You can literally squeeze the air out of the equation. By grouping items together, Cainiao can optimize the density of the shipment. They can mix heavy items with light items to hit that perfect sweet spot where they are maximizing both the weight and the volume capacity of the aircraft. This brings the cost per unit down significantly.
It is like playing a giant global game of Tetris.
It really is. And there is another layer to this that Daniel touched on in his prompt, the third country routing. Beyond just the logistics of the flights, there is a strategic element involving international postal agreements.
You mean the Universal Postal Union? We have talked about that before. I think it was back in episode 112 when we were discussing why it used to be so cheap to ship from China to the United States.
Exactly. The Universal Postal Union, or UPU, sets the terminal dues that national postal services charge each other to deliver international mail. For a long time, China was classified as a developing nation, which meant they paid very low rates to have their mail delivered in countries like the United States or Israel.
But those rules have been changing recently, right? The developing nation status is being phased out or adjusted because China's e-commerce volume is so massive now.
Precisely. The rates for direct shipping from China have gone up. However, by routing through a third country like Singapore, logistics providers can sometimes tap into different postal agreements or commercial shipping rates that are more favorable. Singapore has its own set of treaties and highly competitive commercial logistics providers like Singapore Post.
So, by moving the origin of the final leg of the journey to Singapore, they might be bypassing some of the higher costs associated with shipping directly from China.
It is a possibility. It is less about tricking the system and more about choosing the most cost-effective legal pathway. When you are moving millions of packages, a saving of even 10 cents per package adds up to millions of dollars.
That is a staggering scale. It also explains why the tracking information can be so confusing. You see your package leave a warehouse in China, then it arrives in Singapore, then it sits there for a few days, and then suddenly it is in Tel Aviv. It feels like it is stuck, but in reality it is just waiting for its team of other packages to arrive so they can all board the plane together.
Right, that waiting is the consolidation phase. And as Daniel noticed, The transit time from the hub to the destination is often very fast. Once that pallet is built and on a plane, it is handled with high priority. The slow part is the first mile in China and the sorting in the hub. But for the consumer, the total time is often shorter than the old fragmented model because the last mile delivery is so much more streamlined.
I also wonder about the environmental impact. On one hand, you are flying things further. On the other hand, you are filling the planes more efficiently. Does the efficiency gain outweigh the extra miles?
That is a complex question. Generally, in logistics, utilization is the key to sustainability. A half-empty plane is the worst-case scenario. By ensuring that every flight is as full as possible, consolidation reduces the total number of flights needed to move the same amount of goods. So even if the distance is longer, the carbon footprint gram of cargo might actually be lower.
That is an interesting second-order effect that most people would not consider. We always assume the shortest path is the greenest path, but in a networked world, that is not always true.
Exactly. It is about the system, not just the single journey. And this model is only going to get more sophisticated. We are seeing the rise of bonded warehouses where popular items are pre-shipped to hubs like Singapore before anyone even orders them.
Wait, so they are predicting what people will buy?
Oh, absolutely. Alibaba has incredible predictive analytics. They know that during certain times of the year, there will be a surge in demand for specific electronics or fashion items in Israel. They can move that stock to a regional hub in advance. When you click buy, the package is not coming from China. It is already waiting in Singapore or even in a local warehouse here.
That explains the choice or 10-day delivery options we see on the app now. It is not that the planes got faster, it is that the items were already halfway here.
Precisely. The war on the screen that we talked about in episode 252 is being won by moving physical goods closer to the consumer before the consumer even knows they want them. It is a transition from reactive logistics to predictive logistics.
This really changes how I look at my tracking updates. Instead of seeing a delay in Singapore as a nuisance, I should see it as my package participating in a massive coordinated effort to save fuel and space.
It is a very zen way to look at it, Corn. Your micro HDMI adapter is just waiting for its friends.
Exactly. It is a social butterfly of a package. But seriously, the level of integration required between Cainiao, the airlines, the customs authorities in multiple countries, and the local postal services is just staggering. It is a testament to how digital infrastructure has paved the way for physical infrastructure to evolve.
And it is not just for the big players anymore. We are seeing logistics as a service, where smaller sellers can tap into these same consolidation networks. It levels the playing field in a way that was unthinkable 20 years ago. Back then, if you were a small craftsman in a remote province, reaching a customer in the Middle East was almost impossible. Now you just drop your package at a local Cainiao station and let the machine handle the rest.
It really is a global village, just one connected by cargo holds and automated sorting belts.
I think there is also a lesson here for other industries. This idea that indirect but optimized is better than direct but fragmented applies to everything from data routing on the internet to how we design public transit systems.
That is a great point. We often have a bias toward the straight line, but the straight line is rarely the most efficient path in a complex system.
Exactly. The hub and spoke model, when executed with the kind of data density that Alibaba has, is incredibly resilient. If one spoke is blocked, the hub can quickly reroute. It is a self-healing network in many ways.
So, to answer Daniel's question, the indirect routing makes sense because it allows for maximum density, leverages existing passenger flight capacity, bypasses expensive direct shipping postal rates, and streamlines the customs process through highly efficient hubs like Singapore. It is a classic example of how more miles can lead to less cost.
Spot on. It is the paradox of modern logistics. The longer path is the shortcut.
Well, I think we have thoroughly explored this rabbit hole. It is amazing how much depth there is in a simple question about shipping routes. It touches on economics, technology, and even international diplomacy.
It really does, and it makes you wonder what the next step is. Will we see floating warehouses in international waters, or giant airships that act as mobile consolidation hubs?
Knowing the pace of innovation in this space, I would not bet against it. Maybe in episode 500, we will be talking about how our packages are being consolidated in low Earth orbit.
Space logistics. I can see the white papers already. I will start reading up now.
Please do, Herman. I expect a full report by next week.
You got it.
All right. That brings us to the end of today's exploration. A huge thanks to Daniel for sending in that prompt. It is these kinds of observations about the mundane world around us that often lead to the most interesting insights.
Absolutely. If you, our listeners, have noticed something weird or interesting in your daily life, please let us know. You can reach us through the contact form at myweirdprompts.com. We love hearing from you and diving into these topics together.
And if you've been enjoying the show, we would really appreciate a quick review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and keeps us motivated to keep digging into these weird prompts.
It really does make a difference. We see every review and we truly appreciate the support.
You can find all our past episodes, including the ones we mentioned today about the Universal Postal Union and the war on the screen, at myweirdprompts.com. We also have an RSS feed there for those of you who like to stay updated that way.
Thanks for joining us today in Jerusalem. This has been My Weird Prompts.
Until next time, stay curious and keep asking those questions. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.